My brother brought us a bunch of candy, and I just want to share with you this really awesome Could You Be a Bigger Bitch fruit gum.
Wow.
Seriously, I really hate you. Thought that was interesting.
Nice. Nice.
And then this other flavor called cat butt gum. This is my show and tell for the night.
That's excellent. We need to send that to Nancy Skolos. She would appreciate the cat butt gum.
She would actually appreciate that.
She would love that.
Hello and welcome to DesignChat, the best live design discussion on the internet. I'm your host, Ryan McGovern, and I'm having an asthma attack. I'm sorry, I'm going to cough in your ear all show long. So every once in a while we get together with some of the coolest people in the design industry. Tonight we are talking to Mr. Angry Paul Rand, a.k.a. Mitch Goldstein. Lots of applause, lots of applause.
Thank you,
Welcome.
thank you. Thank you.
Good to have you here. Okay, so usually we kick off these things by having our guest do a little self-introduction for people who are not familiar with you and or your work and or your personas. A little brief history about who you are, what you do, and why you do it.
Sure. So my name is Mitch Goldstein, and most of you probably know me via my Angry Paul Rand account from, what was it, like 2 years ago now, I guess, 2 summers ago. But I'm also a designer and a design writer and a design educator. I just graduated with my master's from Virginia Commonwealth University, and my fiance and I and partner and I are heading to Maryland Institute College of Art, that's MICA, to teach in Baltimore. And I actually just moved like literally 4 days ago to Baltimore. So everything you can't see like from here over is a total shambles. But right in here looks pretty good. But everything else looks like a total pile of crap. But in here we're good. So that's pretty much who I am, I guess.
For those of you who have not been here before, we'll do a little bit of interview. We'll take questions from the audience. The way that you can do that is by clicking on the Ask a Question button on the right-hand side, red button. Excuse me. And you can either type in the question or you can actually get on camera and be part of the conversation, which somebody might have to do because I'm going to die.
Yeah.
Let's just, I've mentioned it like 6 times. Can you tell I'm excited about it? The Angry Paul Rand thing.
Yeah.
Let's hear a little bit of the history, how it got started, and your reaction to it as it became very popular.
Sure. I mean, it was basically, I had moved into Richmond, Virginia from Providence, Rhode Island, where, my partner Ann and I had our studio, and we've been running it for a few years. And we decided to go back to grad school. So we moved into Richmond, I think, in like May. And school obviously doesn't start until end of August. So we had this sort of like, we had a little client work we were finishing up, but we were kind of getting rid of stuff so we would have time to do grad school. And I pretty much had like these 3 months sitting in Richmond, which is like hot as like, it's crazy hot down there for anybody who's been down there. And I just had like nothing to do. So I kind of was thinking that would be pretty funny, Angry Paul Rand. I mean, he's dead. He probably won't sue me, And, I'd had Twitter for a while, but I didn't kind of know what to do with it. I sort of was thinking like people don't care what I had for lunch, or, they don't want a picture of my brunch any more than anybody else does. So I was kind of thinking, like, I didn't kind of know what to do with Twitter, and the Angry Paul Rand thing just kind of came to me one night. So I basically came up with, like, 10 pithy bullshit comments and posted them on Twitter, and followed, like, Twitter searched for, like, design and followed absolutely everybody I could, and then it just kind of rolled. And you know how social media is these days. Stuff just kind of blows up, and you can't really plan it. You can't really predict it. And it just became a thing. And it was something I was doing through, I write about when I ended it. I mean, into school. And then it kind of got too big. Like, instead of worrying about grad school, I was worrying about what my next tweet was going to be, stuff like that, which is completely inappropriate and totally not okay. And it just kind of, it got to be, it wasn't that it was too big. I mean, it was kind of great. It was kind of fun. I mean, it's really cool having like 15,000 people pay attention to you to some extent. I mean, it's a huge ego boost, obviously, but it got to be a little distracting, and it got to be a little too a little negative for me. Like, people kind of want me to be a sarcastic asshole, and that's kind of fun sometimes, but that's not really kind of what I'm about totally. I mean, everybody's a little bit, but and so it just kind of got it didn't get old. It just got like emotionally unpleasant. Not that I was upset about it or anything. It just got less interesting than it was at the beginning, and I decided it was just time to kind of call it a day. It was very simple. I think I write about it, on my site. There was, one last tweet, and a couple people disagreed with me, and I got really snarky with them, and it was totally unjustified, and I feel horrible about it, and I really, and it was just me being like a dick, and it was totally unnecessary. And I was like, this is kind of not really fun anymore. It's kind of become, it's like too important almost. And I don't want to, I'm not angry. I'm Mitch Goldstein. I'm not angry, Paul Rand. I'm a person with a career and wanting to teach and stuff. And it was just kind of time to stop. So that's pretty much what happened.
Like I teased Mitch about before we started the show, we can do the entire show just by reading off some of these tweets that he sent out and then reacting to them. So I'm going to start with that now.
Okay.
Well, first I got to ask, when I found out about the account and what was happening and that somebody else was behind it and that it was you and all this kind of stuff, the first thing that came to mind is, wow, this guy is kind of like, it's almost like getting to play puppeteer, right? There's a persona that existed, and he was this extremely big person in design and very important, obviously. There's a lot of bits of history that we hear about, like his talks with Steve Jobs and excuse me, designing the next logo.
Right.
And then you just kind of got to puppet him for a little while. Had you ever done anything like that before?
Never.
Never?
Not even close. Like, not even, that was out of nowhere. Like, it really came out of it. I didn't even realize I was like. I always know I was a relatively humorous person, but I didn't realize I was that funny. Apparently that funny. I mean, I guess. Yeah, it just, I don't know. I've been a designer for a long time. I mean, I've done it since, I don't know, 1998-ish, give or take. So it's been, whatever, 12, 14 years now. I mean, I've been longer than I realized. So, I've kind of like got a lot of shit to say about design, as does everybody. Everybody's got an opinion, and we have certainly no shortage of attitude in design, graphic design especially, which is my particular field. And there's just like a lot of stuff that sort of wanted to be said. And I figured, what the hell, And it kind of started out with me trying to really channel Paul Rand. And I've had a lot of professors. I went to RISD, and like 70% of the professors there went to Yale, and half of them had Paul Rand. So I have always had this Paul Rand is not just a person, he's this godlike figure who is beyond mere humanity, And I kind of think it would be I thought it was sort of like a good opportunity to have a little fun. And another influence, I think, was Paul Serre, the designer Paul Serre, who is also a very like wittily sardonic, kind of sort of bitter but kind of awesome guy at the same time. And I've seen a couple of his YouTube videos, and I kind of just sort of all lumped it in together. And it kind of started out with me trying to be, I would hesitate to say historically accurate, but to be sort of relatively realistic with it. And it really became just me. I mean, it was just me and my opinions. And since the Twitter account is closed, I've gotten a chance to really do a lot of writing. And a lot of my writing, which you can see, and I will post a link here on my MFA site, is really kind of the extension of the Angry Paul Rand account. It's kind of the next evolution, because it's really my critiques on design, design education, kind of what I think about the industry, what I think about design school, the things that I'm kind of personally interested in, the stuff that really excites me. And that's kind of where it happened.
Why it really just struck such a chord in the design community is because a lot of the things you were saying, a lot of the things we're thinking, but not saying, right? Here's one of my favorites. you kids keep worrying about what tools you should be using to make design. You know what I used? A pencil, a dry martini, and some balls.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that kind of sums him up, you know? Because I've never heard stories about, and I've heard a lot of stories about people who knew him and had him, and it's always been, and it's never been, and then he gave me a big hug and he was like, listen, asshole, this is what you're going to do. You know, like that's kind of who he is. And I mean, the guy was obviously a genius. So he can get away with it. You know, it's legit when he does it. If I did that in you know, my real life, in my client school, you know, I can't really get away with that. I'm not that brilliant, you know. So it was kind of fun to just get to play that for a while. And you know, I know people who knew him who very much approved of what I was doing, and I know of some people who thought what I was doing was totally disrespectful and completely inappropriate. And everybody's entitled to an opinion. So
sure,
that's their problem, not my problem.
You know, in the sentiment of that particular tweet, you know, since the 90s and the politically correct era, where everybody got extremely offended by everything.
Yeah,
we are in this time where it's all huggy, support you. Oh, that's a really good piece of work. Da 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 da. And nobody's really critical. It's almost offensive to be openly critical often, right?
Yes,
and
absolutely.
That sort of sentiment has a, you know, kick you in the ass kind of get up and do it right attitude.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, you know, as somebody who's taught for a long time, I've taught design for 7 years now, 8 years, 6 years, something like that. And, you know, the hardest thing to do is to be really seriously hardcore critical. It's very easy to be sort of huggy and nice and, oh, you know, you put the, you know, and that's kind of doesn't really help people become better designers. And it's kind of easy to do like what they call the happy sandwich, you know, where it's like good thing and then a critique and then a bad thing, and you make a little sandwich and you can swallow it. And I think as I continue to teach and as I go on in my career, I mean, I think that I am highly motivated and highly, you know, very conscious of being critical, not disrespectful, not belittling, not embarrassing people, but being really seriously critical. And it only helps the students. And every student I've ever talked to has always said, I really want real critique. And I think that half of the students really mean that. And I think the other half of the students really want an ego boost and a pat on the back and an attaboy. And that's just the nature of the beast, you know. And I think that it's part of a job as an educator is to really make people better, you know. I always tell my students on day one, if any of my students are in this chat right now, they'll verify this, like the first thing I say is I'm the least important person in the room. You know, it's about the students. It's not about me. I'm the one who gets to benefit in my own selfish way. You know, I learn as much as I get to teach, but it's about making students better at what they do. It's not about making me feel powerful or any of that crap. That is not what teaching is about at all, in my opinion.
When young students are first learning not only to design, but how to critique their design and other designs around them,
yep.
I think one of the biggest challenges is learning the difference between objective reasoning and subjective reasoning, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah. Is your reasoning based on criteria that are, you know, sort of scientific proven criteria within the work, or is it just a personal feeling that you have that, you know, you had a bad experience with the color blue when you were 9, so you don't believe in putting blue?
Yeah, you know, exactly.
That sort of stuff. How do you overcome some of those hurdles in teaching students how to talk about their work?
Well, you know, that's a really tough thing to do, and I think that the answer varies on the level of student. I think for, you know, sophomore, freshman, you know, sort of lower end students, intro students, students who are beginning, maybe students who, you know, are continuing education students who maybe haven't been in school for a while. I think that my personal opinion is something that I always say, I'm not saying this is wrong, this is just what Mitch likes, and I'll kind of give them a comment on that, but I will, you know, I'll qualify it by saying it's really not about a general critique. It's more about my own personal aesthetic taste. So I really try to do my best to let students give everybody a fair shake. But I think as time moves on and as students get into seniors, juniors, seniors, even some grad students, things like that, it's so completely subjective that I don't believe that there is objectivity. I know a lot of people disagree with me on that, and I'm sort of outspoken on the whole like design as problem solving thing. It's just not something I personally do. Not saying it's incorrect, it's just not what I am interested in. So I think that it is a personal opinion, and it is how design makes me feel. I think that design is a very emotional, emotive thing. It is not a generic, anybody can do it thing. You know, it is a very deep, personal relationship you have with a piece of work, even if it's just a package on the store. You know, there's a reason why, people will buy a $9 packet of peanuts from Whole Foods instead of a $2 packet of peanuts from Stop and Shop. I mean, the packaging makes you feel more legit and all that other stuff. So I think that personal opinion is super important. I appreciate that it has to be separated, but I do not tell students to try to ignore it and try to be totally generic and objective. I don't think that's good. I think it's very easy to be very mediocre at design. It's a really simple, you get a laptop, it's Photoshop and whatever, and you're a designer, quote unquote. But to really do it, and I mean to really like seriously do it, is a very different thing, Oh, here comes another.
If a client just wants someone who can push a mouse around, they can get a fucking cat.
It's true.
I'm just gonna let that simmer for a second.
We're just gonna sit on that for everybody. Just
absorb that and think about cats. It brings up an interesting question, I think. In your personal experience, where you've got all of this time that you spent in and around universities in the education space, but you also, with your fiance and partner, take on professional work.
Yes.
And I'd like to hear a little bit about how you navigate between those two universes, because they're very different. In the way that you approach problems. And I think the further that some designers get away from university, the more they're, what's the word I'm looking for? Not the cough. The ability to navigate the design process changes the further you get away from university.
Yeah, I mean, my least favorite phrase in education is the real world. Like, you're going to do this in this class, but then there's the real world. Well, I think that's bullshit. We're all in the real world. We're just not in a getting paid to do work world. So it is all real. But I think that, client work is absolutely a different animal than schoolwork, but I do think that there is a direct correlation, and I think that there should be more of a direct correlation. And what Ann and I, and again, I can only speak for myself and Ann, and what we've done. And we have been fortunate enough to really work with clients as opposed to for clients. Not every time, not every client, but we really try to have relationships with these clients who hire us not because we happen to know which button to click in InDesign, but hire us because we know how to get their ideas into visual stuff, be it, print, web, motion, blah, 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 blah. So I really think that it is a different dance that you do when you're in school, doing work for school, when I do my own kind of personal research versus stuff we do with clients. But I really think that the attitude towards the work should be maybe not identical, but really damn close. I mean, I think that the approach that we take to design, I think how we relate to design, and how we as designers are sort of creators and authors of design should not change just because somebody is paying you for it. Maybe the deliverable changes, maybe the timeline changes, maybe there's an expectation of productivity that changes. I mean, there are certainly things that are different, but, you you're not really there to just make the client happy. I kind of think you're there, and I know this sounds really ridiculous, to make the design happy. And the happy design makes the client happy, and the happy design makes the audience happy, and the happy design makes you happy. There are much easier ways to make money than being a designer. I mean, much easier ways, right? But it's such an interesting thing to do, and it's just such a fascinating, complicated little nugget of stuff that it's just, it's great. And whether you're in school or working for a client, I mean, it shouldn't matter, Oh, another one. Here we go.
Design is hard. You want something easy? MIT has a theoretical physics department you should look into, pussy. It's the bang on the end that really punches you in the face.
Yeah. I gotta tell you, I can explain.
Why?
Because it's so impossible to explain. Because you can argue that every single thing we touch, we see, we read, we hear, we taste, we smell, other than literally being in the middle of the woods, and I'm not going to get into any kind of religious conversation here, is designed. Like everything is designed. So everything kind of is designed. So because everything is everything, it's like everything is nothing. You know what I mean? It's like that great line on Parks and Recreation where Ron Swanson says, it's art. Anything is anything. It's like it's so nebulous and it's so everywhere that it's so difficult to even explain. I mean, I try to explain to my dad what I do for a living, and I just go, just look at don't worry, I make stuff, don't worry about it. Because it's so hard to explain, but I think that's why it's so freaking fun, and why it's so interesting to do daily, weekly, nightly, hourly sometimes, it's just such a cool kind of bizarre mix of kind of application and theory, and there's sort of technology involved, and then there's kind of all these different ways of working, and a lot of my thesis at grad school was really about process and sort of discovery through process. And so it's just, it's like the best, worst, greatest job, horrible thing ever. It's, you know what I mean? It's like everything. But I'll tell you, and I say this from the bottom of my heart, the worst day being a designer is 1,000 times better than the best day I ever had, waiting tables or, selling computers or any of the other bullshit I did before I got to do this. I mean, really. And I mean that absolutely sincerely,
I think we're seeing some institutions teaching, approaching the education about design in new ways. In that, traditionally in industry and other businesses, this graphic design is looked at as only graphic design. You guys make pictures that get printed out on vinyl and get slapped on displays.
Right.
But we're seeing the thinking in some institutions shift to being that more broad sense, like you were just talking about. Everything you see around you, someone made a series of decisions to end up at that result. Maybe they were good decisions, maybe they were bad, maybe it was a product that was completely created by an engineer who never really took into, factored in the human factor, right?
Right.
Within the education space, what's your current perception of, percentage of universities that are still focusing just on open up InDesign and export a PDF, and the universities that are thinking about approach the whole picture?
Well, I think that every school, at least every reasonably reputable to very reputable school, is absolutely understanding the context design lives in. It is no longer we are teaching people to make business cards. It just isn't that anymore. Maybe you do that, but that's not what it is anymore. But I do think that a lot of schools are really fetishizing technology in a way that I get a little uptight about. They're sort of very interested in teaching the tools, and they're very interested in teaching, the current version of Adobe or the current thing in processing or any number of technologies. And that's fine, but that's really not design. You know, I make this analogy, and a lot of these people in the chat room probably heard me say this, but you know, that technology is really this elevator, and it's what your ideas ride to get out of your head. So we need to be teaching the ideas, and we need to be teaching the concepts, and we need to be teaching how to think and how to ideate, and we really should not be teaching the best way to ride the elevator, whether I'm on elevator CS6, you know, and all that other crap. Like it's not that important, because the technology is fleeting, and the technology changes continually. The technology transitions. A year from now, we'll be using something else. 10 years from now, we'll be using something totally different. But the ideas and the thinking and the kind of evolution of thought and the ideation and the coming to solutions and conclusions and artifacts, I think that's really where the interesting stuff is. You know, that's the stuff. That's the beef. Like, that's the meat. That's the burger that you're biting. You know, the technology and whether I know, you know, After Effects 9 or blah, 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 or I used Motion or I like Photoshop or I like Lightroom, it's sort of meaningless in a sense. I mean, it's not irrelevant, but it's sort of meaningless, you know. And I do think that there is a responsibility to teach technology, or to more accurately teach the tools of design. I think that is absolutely a critical requirement, and by no means should not be taught. But I think it needs to be not only tools. It needs to be mostly ideas, concepts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, and I think schools are generally doing a pretty good job. I think they're figuring it out. Oh, we got another one coming. Everybody settle.
Infographics are graphic design's auto-tune. Angry Paul Rand.
I did not say that. I have no idea where that came from. I would never say something so disrespectful. That would be inappropriate.
I think it's why you don't want to offend people who like auto-tune?
Yeah, I mean, because auto-tune's awesome. So, you know.
No, it's not. I think it's one of the first. You know, it's a rare moment in sort of design history where an artifact that, you know, kind of starts, it has its roots in just simple graphic design, has raised to public awareness so much throughout social media, where we're seeing many different types of blogs posting about the best way to make an infographic, or you know, here's the infographic about the top 10 this and the top 10 that, and we see them at year's end in December, right? What is it? Why did that grab root in popular culture?
You know, I have no idea, and I think that good infographics, and there are some very, very talented people doing infographics out there. You know, the point of an infographic is to make information easier to understand, to help you get more out of the information. It is not about making cool-looking, goofy crap that you've seen 100 times over on, you know, Absudito or whatever. I can never, you know, like, you know, that's not the point, right? The point is to enhance information and to convey. Oh, am I timing out?
Fabio Sasso.
Yes.
Is a friend of the show. And
yeah. Oh, and I think
his blog is called Abdizito, and I love telling people this, that the word Abdizito actually means abducted in Portuguese.
See, that makes a lot of sense.
There you go.
That and you know, and again, I think what he's doing is great with all the stuff that he's showing. But what concerns me, where I get uptight, is that it's sort of like, you know, Photoshop filter make infographic, you know, and that scares the crap out of me. That gets me very uptight, and that's kind of where that tweet came from. You know, it's like an infographic of my cat's eating habits from the past. You know, like, it doesn't matter. Like, it's, you know, it doesn't need an infographic. You know, so I just kind of find that stuff to get a little, the sort of trends, the things like that. Again, I don't mean to belittle or insult anyone. It's not really about whether I'm right or not, or I'm the guy, you know, like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. But I just find some of that stuff to be a little kind of bothersome in a way.
I think an interesting artifact that's coming out of the popularity of infographics in the web is that it's putting a magnifying glass on people and groups who do good design and people who don't get it. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Like you said, we get these huge, monolithic, a million factoid infographics that don't clarify the problem. They do the opposite of what they're intended to do. They make the problems more complex.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly. And I think that's, somebody asked me recently, where I think design, that's certainly going to help with the asthma, Ryan. Yeah. Somebody asked me recently where I thought like design was going, like like I'm any expert, but somebody asked me, and I said I think that the separation between, and I'm using the terms good and bad in a very loose sort of objective way, I think the separation between good and bad is going to get easier to see because the point of entry of design now is very low, like we just said, and anybody can kind of do it in a sense. So the transition between good, not appropriate, poorly designed stuff and really good design, I think that's going to keep getting bigger and bigger. And the really good stuff is going to rise, and the really bad stuff is going to keep falling down. And I think that's fine. And you know what? I think it's awesome that some 13-year-old kid wants to be a graphic designer and does a torrent of Photoshop. Like, I think that's fantastic. That's awesome. Like, it's great. I mean, I'm not competing with this kid. Like, I'm not worried about this kid taking my job. It's not like, let him be excited about it. I think it's fantastic, I
want to remind the audience that we encourage you guys to ask questions. Yeah, we see the chat room come flying by, but there's a red submit a question, ask a question button on the side. I see two are sitting there. We're going to get those to you in a second. It's 1:45, but we started a little bit late. So, Mitch, if you're cool, we'll go a little bit past our 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock for you time.
I'm cool.
Let's start bringing in some of those audience questions now.
All right.
Please, guys, submit the questions, either text or get on video, and be part of the conversation. So the first one, from Darren McCann, I've never been interested in design, but I have cheese slices and milk. Is this better?
I think the question you have to ask is, what does better really mean?
And moving on.
Yeah, exactly.
Cheese slices and milk. I don't know.
I have no idea where to go with that.
A craft commercial.
And what's interesting is that...
Go ahead.
I was going to say, what's interesting is that the screener approved that question, so...
I saw that.
Nicely done.
Yeah, quality. Across from the table is my brother, Patrick McGovern, who wants to know, given all of the focus on Angry Paul Rand, what would you rather people focus on regarding your work?
Well, first of all, I would rather they focus on me and my work, obviously, so that's a good question. I think that my work over the past couple of years, because I've been in graduate school, and it's been, for those of you who have gone through a grad program, it's not necessarily about producing work that's accessible to everybody else. It's really more about figuring out kind of your own deal and your own relationship to design. So I think that the stuff that I've done lately is, in my opinion, very interesting to me, but I think to a lot of people outside of me, they're kind of looking at it like, what are you doing? I don't quite get it. So I can kind of understand where the Angry Paul Rand thing is a lot more popular, because people can understand the Angry Paul Rand stuff. But I really think that where my work is going and kind of my research, and when you teach, you do a few things, amongst which is what you call research, which is just sort of your own stuff. And that's really going into taking these kind of esoteric ideas that are kind of very abstract and very nebulous, and you can see all that on my website, and really bringing them forward into a more applied place, into a more I would hesitate to use the word real, but into a more accessible sort of forum, into a context where they're going to be sort of more relevant to people other than just me. So that's kind of what I hope happens, but at the same time, I also think that, I am opinionated dude, and I've got things to say, and I think really one of the greatest gifts of grad school, and there are many, many gifts of grad school, was really it got me to write, and that has been a tremendous, tremendous. It's been both a boon for myself. I think I've gotten a chance to write a couple of things that have been pretty interesting, a couple things I picked up at AIGA, so I got a chance to sort of realize that this voice I have is not just me being sort of this like snarky, Twitter jerk. It's like I actually have some stuff going on, and so that is where I think going forward, those are the kind of two roads that I'm hoping to keep sort of moving forward on. Making actual work that is interesting and doing stuff, and also continuing to do the writing and the authoring.
I completely appreciate where you're coming from about making that transition from what was popular to what you're passionate about. Yeah. But I'm going to harp on this.
Okay, that seems fair.
The only thing winning a design award proves is that you are good at winning design awards. Angry Paul Graham.
It's true.
No, but I mean, flipping through some of these, it's nice because it brings up a lot of the topics,
yeah,
that are relevant in the design community right now. You've got people who never, ever, ever enter any sort of, contest at all, and then you've got people who jump at every single opportunity and throw a bunch of money at it.
Right.
Excuse me, and promote themselves heavily by getting published in any sort of a critique or publication.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're talking to your students about self-promotion and entering competitions, what's the approach that you take?
Well, I admit I have entered some competitions. Fortunately, where we were at VCU, at Virginia Commonwealth, really they covered the tab on as many things as we wanted to enter, so we entered a bunch of stuff. Had a couple of little things, but nothing significant came out of it. And I don't really think that design contests are inherently bad. I just feel like if you're designing hoping it will win an award, that's sort of the wrong way to design. If you're designing hoping it's really good design that's interesting and doing things that are appropriate, and it happens to win an award, that I think is good. So I tell my students not to design for the award, but to design for the design. And then submit it, and if it wins awards, great. The other really good thing about design, contests, design awards, is if, you just need to do a project. You're light on freelance work, whatever, you're in school, it's the summer. There's all sorts of great things out there, and, why not? Go design a poster for, a charity or an AIDS charity or any number of things that I've seen on, I like posters a lot, so poster page, I'm going to tweet out a link here, posterpage.ch. That's on Rennie Warner's poster page, and that is a really, really excellent resource for posters, and he always posts all the competitions that are going on, and sometimes the competitions are just, you've done something in the past year, submit it. Sometimes the competitions are, here's a topic, make a poster, and I don't really have a problem with that. I think it's okay. What I have a problem with is people who are like, okay, I've got to make something that's going to win an award. That kind of scares me, and there's a flip side to that, though, and I'll quote Nancy Skolos again, who told me very early in our career, she said, and you know Nancy, so this is, I swear to God, Nancy said this. She said, part of being a designer is being a competitive bitch hog with your work. And it's about really, to some extent, getting out there and submitting work and getting it recognized. And, as you know, she and Tom do brilliant, I think, magnificent, brilliant work. And it kind of started when they did their first couple of submissions and got the first couple of awards, and then it kind of rolled and rolled and rolled. So the competition thing it's a weird nut, we should be focusing on making really good design, really great things that are really interesting, and the contest should be sort of a byproduct of that and a side to that, not the sort of main goal, I think.
It seems like an exercise in which you can choose to, just like anything in life, participate in it in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And then there's unhealthy ways to participate in it.
Totally.
And it's up to you to, how to navigate yourself in your career in that way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Making your resume layout edgy and creative is like having sex at church. Fun, but inappropriate.
Well, I had some real zingers.
Man, this is good shit. This is good shit. I should say, normally we don't really swear a lot on the show, and typically in the podcast, I bleep out swears.
Right.
And some of my friends who help me out with the show, Andrew in the background right now is putting up notes about every time that we swear, and I don't think I'm going to have time to actually edit out all these. So this might be the edgy version of the podcast.
All right.
But back to the topic at hand.
Yeah.
Creating resumes and edgy and creative resumes. I would imagine, as you're educating these young students, this topic comes up, and you have to help navigate them through this process. What's the worst piece of crap that you ever saw?
I can't count that high. I mean, seriously, are you kidding? We don't have enough show for that. I see a lot of students and professionals who try to kind of stand out with these really goofy resumes with shapes and weird angles, and I kind of really feel like it's like people who make portfolio boxes for their work out of like steel and like glass, and they have weird, and they're all, and it looks like something out of like Game of Thrones with all this crap on it, but the work inside isn't that great. I mean, that's kind of what a really edgy resume is to me. Like, the resume is the place where you just let your work be your work. This is what I've done. This is who I am. Here's my awesome stuff that's really creative and amazing. Here is my very understandable, very well laid out resume, and I think that the resume really shows control, and it really shows sort of typographic mastery, and I think that's a great place for that, and that doesn't mean a crazy, bizarre resume that you like burn into the piece of leather or whatever the hell, I mean, it doesn't mean it's not going to get you a job. I mean, it doesn't mean it's like incorrect or it's wrong. It's just, in my opinion, let the work be amazing. Let the work be creative. Unless you're a resume designer by trade, in which case I guess it's okay,
Speaking of creative work, we've got a question from Doug Bartow.
Doug.
He was last week's guest from ID29, upstate New York. He says, I'm concerned with the lack of typographic knowledge in young designers and grads. How do we fix it? Ready, go.
That's a great question, Doug, and I think I agree, and I think it's more type classes, and I think it's a more intense knowledge of type. I think, you look at Vignelli, he used 5 typefaces for his whole career, supposedly. I think that there needs to be a rigorous, and I mean seriously rigorous, at least 4 classes of type in an undergrad program. When I did RISD undergrad, there was a 3-credit type class, then a 6-credit type class, and then another 3-credit type class as requirements, and you could do a type design class if you wanted to. And I think that typography is sort of like the it's not the DNA of graphic design, but it's kind of like the glue in a way. It kind of holds things together, and if your glue is weak, stuff is going to kind of fall apart. So I really think it's just got to be more rigorous and more intense, and really typography should be taught, I think, in 2 ways. I think we need to teach the rules, and I'm really using rules in a very loose way. Let's call them the proven guidelines. I don't really like the word rules. I think we need to teach that, but I also think we need to teach the expressive, really intensely creative, just go crazy sort of stuff that goes on there. And I think that typography is like this wonderful framework that you can discover all sorts of cool stuff in. And, you look at people like Sagmeister, who started doing, all his crazy stuff with ductwork, using ducks and making type out of like bananas and all that stuff. And, and that's awesome, and it's really interesting. That doesn't mean you should just do that. Like, what's the next evolution? Where else can you go with typography? And I think that some schools think design is really sort of, like we talked about, kind of software and how to do a press check and stuff like that, and, that's a piece of it. But the typography, that's like, that's the stuff. Like, that's kind of, it's sort of a typography and the kind of semiotics, kind of making meaning stuff. I mean, that's design. Like, that's graphic design. That's where it lives, So I agree with you, Doug. I think we need more, and I think type should be taught more intensely, and frankly, I think it should be harder, and I think that it should be, and I agree with the DesignChat link of niche classes. Like, if I want to learn, motion, type in motion, I should be able to take classes on that. And if I want to do sort of type in the environment, this great professor at RISD, Lucy Hitchcock, does this wonderful environmental typography class where these students make these like interjections in the, I don't know how to describe it, these like insertions of type in the environment. They're freaking amazing, and I think that can happen. Type isn't I learned how to kern, and I know how to set type, and I can make my paragraphs and read Bringhurst, and that's it. That is not typography. That's like the first little minute ladder on a very, very big journey, that type is really a part of.
Doug is right. Again, thank you, Doug, for coming on this week and asking that question this week. That stuff that very easily accessible, I'm hand-drawing everything, can be very beautiful and expressive, but I think he's right in that there's a narrow understanding right now of classic typography mixed with rich media and that sort of thing. A previous guest on the show, Carolina Di Bartolo, published a book called Explorations in Typography. There's the link to the website, which is an interesting sort of experiment where she took a paragraph that was written by Eric Spiekerman, and then it was laid out like 50 different ways in this book, and it was a study on how to create different emotions and different weights and all this stuff, and it's really sort of the root level of setting out, classic type. But definitely, and what was great about her, I think, is that she's such a strong believer in the sort of pillars of typography, right? She's writing books about it, right? And definitely check out the website, because there's an interesting feature on there where you can actually reset the type like you're in Illustrator or InDesign. You can actually play with it and change the typefaces. So definitely check that out. But yeah, I couldn't agree more with that one. We've got a couple more questions.
Go for it. No, I was going to say, I look at typography, it's like Legos. You can make the freaking Millennium Falcon out of Legos, and it's awesome. And you can make a little pile of crap out of Legos, and it's all Legos. So, you can do anything with type. It's just a framework that you can work with and do unbelievably, incredibly, mind-bendingly awesome stuff. That's just unbelievable, And that's why it's so awesome.
Mitch Smith wants to know any good sources for learning about infographics, books.
Mitch, I'm probably the wrong guy to ask, to be honest with you. Obviously, I would recommend Tufte. The Edward Tufte books are sort of classics. There was another. You're going to have to send me a DM on Twitter. I can't remember. There was another. Mitch, you're putting me on the spot here. There was another book recently that I'm not going to waste. I forgot this other book. So sorry.
What we Google for?
I can't remember. I want to say it was sort of a book on like mapping and infographics. It's kind of like the sort of about like concept mapping, but it sort of talks about infographics as well. I'm at a loss. Sorry.
Well, when you
I'm not sure if that's it.
tweet at Mitch and then hashtag DesignChat on there so everybody can look for that.
Yeah. Tweet. I'm going to have to remember it.
So we're nearing the end of our hour here. Now is the time to get in your questions. I'm going to throw a couple of reminders out there to people right now. The place to find out about upcoming shows is designchat.info/upcoming. And if you look there right now, you'll see that next week we're talking to people at the Chicago International Social Change Film Festival. There's going to be a very interesting event coming up in Chicago where they're going to have sort of it's like a hackathon, but for designers. And it's going to be like a design-a-thon where they're going to invite designers to come out and come up with concepts and challenge each other for these social change causes. It's going to be very interesting. We'll talk more about it next week. Also, there's a Design Chat podcast. So if you guys can't make it for the live shows, go to iTunes, search Design Chat, subscribe, and anytime we upload a new show, you'll get it for free. It'll download right to your computer. Follow us on Design Chat, at Design Chat on Twitter, too. Self-promotion over. Mitch.
Yes.
When we talked on Sunday, I mentioned we're sort of starting a new feature here on Design Chat where we're asking our guests to share a sort of, not necessarily a tutorial, but a little tip or trick or idea that you use to create something interesting.
Okay.
What you got for us?
I typically put on wax lips and have an asthma attack. I find that, yes, just like that. That works really well. Actually, I thought about this question, and I get stuck a lot, and I've talked about this before, but by far the scariest thing for me is the very, very beginning, the like empty blank page. The like nothing there, go make something amazing. And I think that the best things that I have learned is to just think of the most like idiotic, stupid, ridiculous thing that you should absolutely, positively not do, and then do that as hard as you can. And I'm talking like build it with like Comic Sans and glitter and an animated GIF of a puppy. Like I don't really care, but just like let it happen, And from that, which will inevitably suck, by the way, you will make crap, but from the crap will rise something interesting. And that's really been something that I've really learned, that it isn't about starting well, it's about starting. It's like just shut up and make something. And then when you get frustrated, shut up and make something. And then you're going to get really pissed off and then shut up and then make some more stuff. And that's really my biggest, it's a game changer, and when I forget it, I suck. And I make just junk. And then I go, wait a minute, I know how to do this, kind of. And then I kind of just go for it,
There is that, voice in all of the designers out there, all of their heads, when you're looking at that moment, when you look at that blank canvas, and the voice says, you're no good. There's amazing stuff out there. People are awesome around you, and you're not going to be able to accomplish anything. Is that the voice that you hear in your head before you start?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's I was just, before we started grad school, I was reading online, and there's this thing called, I think it's called imposter syndrome, that happens to apparently a lot of grad students right when they start. They think, why did they let me in here? I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And I get imposter syndrome practically on a daily basis, and I kind of like, in a way, it's sort of freeing. Like I can just go do anything and kind of let stuff happen and just screw it and kind of let it go. So I really think that blank canvas, it's like a gift and a curse all at the same time. It's like the best, worst thing ever.
And then I think there's also something to be said for, because you focus so much on your writing, skills, nice, I like it. On your writing throughout your career so far, I'd like to hear a little bit about your perception of how that's changed your ability to overall communicate your ideas, whether that's visually, verbally, or writing in itself, you know, because it seems like a tool that throughout a lot of our careers, not a lot of designers take advantage of.
Yeah, I agree, and I will be the first to admit, up until 2 years ago, I really never wrote about design at all. And it was just something I didn't really participate in. I mean, and again, Twitter doesn't count as writing about design. But it was really just something that kind of I never considered. And then you get to grad school and you really have to write about design. And, you know, I did a senior degree project during my undergrad. But again, it was very little writing. But I got to tell you, the writing, it doesn't sort of post-rationalize the work I do, but it kind of does in a way. It sort of lets me figure out, oh, that's what I was doing. And I think that's really useful. And something that I'm kind of considering going forward as I teach is forcing students to do more writing. I don't care about blogs or the format. It can be just a text document. You know, it doesn't matter whether it's online or not. That's not really the point. But the point of them sort of forcing themselves to explain what they're thinking about, and which is something that I have learned to do as well, I have found I cannot emphasize enough how useful that has been. It has been really, really helpful, because I feel like I could kind of just like, you know, my links and my work, I mean, I could just kind of screw around with a camera and make cool looking stuff, and that's kind of not that hard anymore. But it's really not interesting. It's just sort of an aesthetic. But really the writing and the thinking and the processing and the ideation and the iteration, that's really where it gets interesting, you know. And that is where I think the writing is just, it's been tremendously useful. Tremendously useful. And if you guys make Ryan laugh too much, he's going to have another asthma attack, and then where are we going to be?
Yeah, I know. And that's how we'll end the show, is just me hacking into the microphone, which everyone will enjoy. No, I mean, I couldn't agree more that, you know, and so many of the really amazing people who have achieved amazing things and come on the show, and we're lucky we get to talk to them. So many of those people encourage professional creatives to reach out into another type of not hobby or interest, right, and then cultivate that. Yours was writing, right? Or you may have other things, but it's one of those things, you exercise a different part of your brain, and that's going to help you think when you get back to your job. That's going to help you think in different ways, and that gives you advantages. Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that, you know, I spend an awful lot of time thinking about design, writing about design, doing design, reading about design, talking about, you know, I mean, design is a very, very important part of my life. But I agree that there are other things that should be there. You know, there are other things. I happen to like cooking a lot. I find cooking to be a really nice difference from making design. You know, I don't worry about like metaphor and symbolism and, you know, kerning my, you know, shrimp Alfredo or whatever. I just kind of make it and it tastes good and it's very easy, you know, in that respect. And I think as kind of a counterpoint to all the really heavy thinking that goes in design, you know, cooking is a very enjoyable release from that in a way.
I think one of the traps that I personally fall into, because, you know, having DesignChat and bringing up these topics over and over and over, is getting up our own ass a little bit, and just repeating the word design over and over and over again. And it seems for me, when I'm thinking about it as I'm falling asleep, that it can lose its meaning, right? Yeah. And then we sound like pretentious assholes. Like I hate those film buffs who are just like, film. We talk about film because we make films. And then all you hear is that, and you hate them. For me, no, it's like we're really passionate about the way that we do our jobs, and we want to help cultivate community and share ideas and all this stuff. I just hope that this platform never turns into a pretentious, we're better than you kind of thing. For me, instead, I hope the opposite, where this is a more inclusive sort of conversation, where we bring intense creative professionals into the conversation, where people who maybe, you know, they're in their first year of school, or they're thinking about taking classes, or they're changing careers or something like that, all the way up to the I live and breathe and work this all the time. My hope is that it becomes a larger discussion where everyone's involved.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, design is inclusive of everyone. Designers are exclusive, and that's the problem, you know. And I think that I think that you know it's so much a part of every single person on this planet's life that it can't be an ivory tower. I mean, it just shouldn't be, you know. You look at the great stuff like Ellen Lupton's done with the DIY design, you know, all that stuff. I mean, it's fantastic. It's exactly right. It's what it should be, you know. And then a lot of people start coming in with all these, oh, but then I'm competing with like these kids, and that's bullshit. If you're really competing with a 12-year-old, you've got other problems. You know, you've got other things you need to be concerned about. Seriously. So I agree with you.
Of the resentful hipster, right?
Yeah.
I did it before it was cool, and now that you're doing it, you suck. Right. You know, kind of thing that I think the design community sort of needs to fight off.
Yeah. 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 I think that you know, it's sort of the thing with the elitist design thing. It's kind of like it sort of feels cool when you're in it, but it's just bad. It's not good. And you know, it's always cool to be, you know, invited into the party and to be let through the rope into the club, but it doesn't make you like a better person or anything like that. You know, it's just it's sort of kind of pointless, and it doesn't really matter. And I think that talking to non-designers about design is, if not at least as useful, probably more useful than talking to designers about design. You know, I mean, you want other input. You want other voices going in there. Part of the great thing about getting to teach at an art school like Micah is that there is sculpture, and there is, you know, down the street is a great theater. I mean, there's all this, like, stuff going on. And the stimulation is just, I mean, it's just a constant barrage of stimulation. And that's really sort of what's so awesome about design school and art school, I think. You know, it's never boring.
Agreed.
Yeah.
110%. Mitch, I got to say this has been an invigorating discussion tonight. I think next week I'm just going to read tweets to myself, and the audience will love that, and I'll do it with my wax lips.
Yeah, there you go.
I'll call for a microphone. You can't understand what I'm saying. No, really, seriously, it's been a pleasure having you here, getting to hear a bit of your story and a little bit more about the Angry Paul Rand thing. Congrats on your move. I hope
Thank you very much.
A tremendous success in your new location there.
Thank you. I hope so too.
And we got to have you on again sometime. This was awesome. The audience obviously loved it. You're getting text applause in there, so yay! Woo!
Yay! Well, Ryan, I'm happy to be your pinch hitter guest. Anytime you need somebody to be entertaining, just send me an email. I'm on. I'm there for you.
It's accepted, guaranteed. You get a direct line. We'll send you a red bat phone that you can just be like, hello.
That sounds great. Ooh, DesignChat. Yeah, that sounds great.
Cool. Thanks for everybody who participated. Again, follow us on Twitter at DesignChat, which you might already do because you're here in the first place. Subscribe to the podcast. Tell your friends. Tweet with hashtag DesignChat, and suggest guests. Hey, we got to get more guests on the show, and I'm always interested in hearing about who you guys want to talk to. So next week, join us, same bat time, same bat channel, and good night, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. See you later, Ryan. Thanks a lot.
Night.
Thanks, Mitch.
Thanks, man. See ya.